Hiya, Barbie.
Hi, Ken.
You wanna go do a podcast?
Sure.
Jump in.
Ladies and gentlemen, Barbies and Kens, Kellys of all ages, and everyone else. Welcome to Binging Barbie, a Barbie movie podcast. I'm your host, John. And with me, I have my wonderful co-host. You will come with us, of course, to carry snacks and things. Fluttercorn, fairy cakes, I will make you a list. Jay!
Is that all I am to you, John?
Yeah. Anyway, for those of you joining us, we are a podcast about Barbie movies. Every week we watch one of the straight-to-DVD animated Barbie movies, and we rate its story, characters, animation, voice acting, and music to see how it stacks up. This week we'll be watching the 12th Barbie animated movie, the first spin-off of the Fairytopia trilogy, Barbie Mariposa and her butterfly fairy friends. With us to discuss this movie, we have two returning guests, Sarah and Emma.
Hello. Hello.
So yeah, Sarah and Emma, you are back again for more. Apparently we didn't scare you off the first time.
Only partially.
So usually we start by asking our guests their Barbie history, but we've already done that for you. So what is your Mariposa history? Have you seen this movie before?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, what did you think of it in the past?
I remember liking it. Yeah, me too.
Okay. Was it one of your favorites or just kind of...
Honestly, the only part I remember was Barbie getting her wings.
Okay.
And I thought that was a cool scene. No, I just remember watching it over and over again like all the other Barbie movies we owned.
Yeah, this was Barbie Mariposa was released on DVD February 26, 2008, and then it aired on Nickelodeon on March 2nd, so a few days later. And it is directed by Conrad Helton, who he's been around these Barbie movies for a while. He was the animation supervisor on 8 of them, starting with Rapunzel. So he's kind of moving up to director, but he's been involved for quite a few of these movies. And he actually directs a lot of movies after this, so it's a promotion that he's gonna keep for a while. And yeah, it was written, once again, Elise Allen is back. She's done the Fairytopia movies, and she did Barbie Diaries, so this is kind of familiar ground for her, this fairy stories. And yeah, the music is by Eric Colvin once again. He's also been working on these Fairytopia movies. So we have, even though this is a spin-off of the Fairytopia franchise, it's still very connected creatively with the original Fairytopia trilogy. And yeah, it starts out by letting you know exactly that, because this is the first time we've had a framing narrative in a while. Even though this is the story of Mariposa, I don't know how to pronounce it because that pronunciation. I might just have to. Anyway, Mariposa is the main character here, but we start out with, well, Bibble, who's preparing to visit Dizzle, or preparing for Dizzle to visit him.
He's preparing to not visit.
Yes. He kind of knocks over a bunch of rock statues he's made of Dizzle's friends, and is feeling kind of let down or not sure of himself. So then Alina, who's been the protagonist of these Fairytopia movies, decides to narrate him a story. So Kelly has officially been fired as the kid who gets told the story, and now Bibble has taken her place. And Alina tells Bibble the story of Mariposa, and the butterfly fairies.
Yeah. You should have seen my reaction to just the first second. The very first thing I hear is that darn Bibble. And my thoughts is like, oh, this is like a brand new thing. And I hear Bibble. I'm like, no. Bibble. The opening is just random. It has nothing in it. It's just Bibble doing Bibble stuff. And then we get to the story. And it's like, great story. This is so much better.
And then they cut back to Bibble. You're like, no.
I know.
Then back to story, and then back to Bibble. The first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes of this movie are the worst segments of the movie
Mm-hmm.
by a long shot.
Mm-hmm.
But you kind of have to have something there.
They do reflect Bibble's journey,
Yeah.
but they also, like, going through the film, it's like, this is also a reflection of Alina's journey.
Yeah, and I have a comment on that later down. But
Mm.
yeah, it is a framing narrative that obviously they're trying to bring in the Fairytopia audience while also bringing in a new audience, maybe a slightly younger audience who didn't have the Fairytopia movies coming out when they were sort of younger. A lot of times these kids franchises will do these reboots every so often just to kind of get in the younger audience who are finally aging into being interested in this. But yeah, you kind of have to acknowledge Alina and Bibble if you're making a Fairytopia movie. But also, I kind of wish that it had just been like as simple as the Kelly and Barbie stuff in the other movies,
Mm-hmm.
where that those are like, okay, we get a minute and a half at the beginning, a minute and a half at the end, and that's it. And the rest of it is just letting the story play out.
But no, our opening credits had to take place with Bibble.
Yes.
Doing random Bibble stuff.
Now, once the actual story starts, so we get narration that introduces us to the butterfly fairies. They live in a distant corner of Fairytopia called Flutterfield, and they are surrounded by the Bewilderness, and that's inhabited by these Skeezites, who are these flying monsters that hunt and eat the butterfly fairies. And for a long time, the butterfly fairies lived in constant fear until the arrival of Queen Marabella, who brought sort of this magical light that's tied to her life force, and it meant that the butterfly fairies could now have this functioning city. And our protagonist is Mariposa. She's part of the working class of Flutterfield. She works for two upper class fairies, Reyna and Rayla, and she doesn't quite fit in with the rest of Flutterfield. She's a bit of a loner, a bit of an outsider. But when the queen is poisoned, and Prince Carlos, the prince, leaves a map with Mariposa to find the antidote and save Flutterfield. So Mariposa, Reyna, and Rayla go on a quest, and meanwhile, Willa, Mariposa's best friend, discovers that Henna, the queen's attendant, is the one who's been poisoning her. So we have these two parallel plot lines of the quest to find the antidote, and then in the meantime, the sort of political intrigue and sort of what's going on in Flutterfield while Mariposa is off on her quest.
Mm.
These queens need to get new trusted advisors.
Yeah.
That's the second queen that needs a new trusted advisor.
I mean, like, even just last film had almost the exact same poison royalty to take over.
Yeah, it's a common thread. Now, I will say what I love about this movie is that it feels like a second, much better attempt at what Fairytopia, the original Fairytopia movie, was trying to do.
Yes.
You have a lot of similar themes and ideas. It's almost a remake of Fairytopia, where you have the outsider fairy who doesn't quite fit in. You have the queen who's getting poisoned. You have sort of this magical quest that the main character has to go on to find something. But every single aspect of it is better developed.
It's more clear than it was in the original Fairytopia. Even the motivations of characters, you clearly understand them.
Yeah. And I think part of it is just that, Elise Allen, who's the writer of both this and the co-writer of the original Fairytopia, here she gets kind of a second chance to revisit that and maybe apply what she's learned since then to her writing, or even just, maybe she got a little bit more creative freedom here.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is just in pretty much every way an improvement on Fairytopia.
Yeah, because immediately, just the way they set up the world, Like, I could understand the economics, I understand what's going on. Where in Fairytopia, there's just so much that they didn't really establish. And I was confused about the structure of the world. Where here, they tell us this is how the world came to be, and we have these different classes.
Yeah. Within Flutterfield, we have a pretty clear class structure,
Mm-hmm.
and we actually see what a day in the life looks like in Flutterfield. In Fairytopia, we were complaining that you never get a sense for what daily life in Fairytopia is like, but and like fluttering through the meadows.
You wake up in your flower and
Yeah.
flutter through the meadows.
Yeah, then you flutter home and you hope that no one poisons the air. Whereas here we have, Mariposa has a job that she has to go to, and she's part of this working class, and then there's this upper class who's sort of,
They just party every night.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and they're very reliant on the working class to sort of do everything for them. It's not surprising that the queen's attendant is able to get away with so much based on just how we see this class structure playing out. And yeah, it's such a nice thing to see this sort of concrete world building of
Mm-hmm.
Flutterfield. It feels like an actual place, not just a set of backdrops.
Right.
Yeah, this is once again the story of a queen who has been put to sleep, leaving the realm vulnerable. But here the danger is a lot clearer because we have the Skeezites are introduced early on, and they have a very simple and very clear motivation, which is to eat the butterfly fairies.
What a scary society to live in.
Yeah,
It's so great. It's so simple, but it really works. Granted, those designs don't work, but the concept really works.
yeah, it's sort of the here there be monsters idea
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
beyond this society things are not safe, so you kind of have to stay in, and then the threat to the realm is so much more present because we actually see what happens.
Like, you get to the very edge, and they're there,
Yeah.
patrolling, trying to find fairies.
And yeah, the villain this time around also has a relationship with the queen she's poisoning that we see.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Fairytopia, the relationship between the Enchantress and Laverne always felt kind of theoretical. They don't really.
Like, we know they're sisters, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, they're sisters, and that's about it. Whereas here, even though I don't think we have many scenes of the two of them together, we still get this understanding of like Henna, the attendant, is kind of feels like she isn't getting the respect she deserves, and
Like, she wants to rule. She doesn't
yeah,
want to be the working class. If there's any negative I can give with just the villain, it's just, I think one scene before we're introduced to her, of her working and being displeased, would have helped. Because we were immediately introduced to her producing a poison, and my thought was, why is Willa making a poison? Because she
or
looks just like
Henna.
Willa. No,
Oh, I see.
no, because they're both purple.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was slightly confused on that too. I was like, wait, was that Willa? I don't remember that. It's like, oh yeah, that was that Willa. It would have been nice to have a scene of her not fitting in, especially if it was before she came up to, what was main girl's name? Mariposa. Especially if it was before she came up to Mariposa and said, oh, you feel like you don't fit in. I feel that way too. If we could get some visual showing of that, that'd be cool.
Mm.
Yeah.
It still works without it, but it would work
Yeah.
so much better with it.
Now, another thing we just mentioned Willa. I think one of the nice things about this movie is that she actually gets stuff to do, unlike Dandelion in the Fairytopia movies.
Oh yeah.
Dandelion is there to be left behind. Now, Mariposa went to the Alina school of leaving your friends behind. But this time we actually get to see what happens after.
Yeah.
Well, she left a note saying, hey, go do this.
Yep.
But, I mean, yeah. Go talk to Prince Carlos, he'll tell you what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's what I love about the story is that, and I'll attribute it to Elise Allen because she's the writer, where she understands when to cut between these two stories.
Mm-hmm.
The cuts never feel out of place, and the moving between the A and B plot lines. You never lose track of either of them for too long. And it enhances both of them to have this back and forth, especially in the third act when they then come back together. And yeah, there are, because of this A and B structure, there's actually several major character arcs here.
Mm.
Obviously, Mariposa has a huge character arc, and it's a similar character arc to Alina in the first Fairytopia movie, but this time we're tracking it throughout the movie rather than it being something brought up in the last act, in the last
Mm-hmm.
battle scene. Here we understand from the very beginning that Mariposa doesn't quite fit in with the rest of Flutterfield, and that she feels a little excluded, and that she kind of feels like it's her fault. And she has this sort of self-doubt that
Mm-hmm.
then she has to overcome in order to save the kingdom.
And she likes learning about the outside world, the distant things such as stars that other people don't really understand.
Yeah, that she sort of, even though she's different, she has her own place, and that she doesn't need to change herself in order to have that place. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
for Alina, the ending of Fairytopia was, okay, thanks for saving the kingdom. Now we'll give you wings so that you can fit in. Here, it's not an external thing here, unlike in Fairytopia, but here Mariposa doesn't have to change who she is or anything about herself in order to fit in at the end.
You know what really works with that story as well is having her bosses, the two sisters, who initially are just there to be the annoying characters who do annoying stuff. But I liked how they had character changes as well that helped influence Mariposa because they realized Mariposa is actually quite capable by the end, and they're like, "Yeah, you can do it."
Yeah, I was surprised when they came along on the quest because they seem like the type of characters where, okay, you introduce them and then Mariposa eventually leaves and then comes back and then they're like, oh, once she saved the kingdom, oh, we liked you all along. But no, they're on the quest. They're going through this their own journeys
Mm-hmm.
alongside Mariposa, and then we get to that scene in the Cave of Reflections, which we'll probably have to come back to later,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, okay, they have to learn their lessons very directly, just like Mariposa has to. They're confronted with their inner selves, and their inner selves are very different than Mariposa's inner self, but sort of the contrast between that is interesting, and that they both, or all three of them, have these character arcs. And then, yeah, we have, I think, a pretty compelling villain
Yeah.
because she recognizes a problem, which is that Flutterfield has some major class stratification, where we have this divide between the upper class and the lower class, and the working class is kind of, at least from what we see with Mariposa, not given respect for the work they do
Mm-hmm.
and are kind of treated poorly by this upper class. So the fact that Hetna is going against that kind of makes her interesting, but rather than just seeking to address that problem, she wants to put herself on top of the hierarchy.
And switch it from within. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my question is with that is if the Skeezites eat all the butterfly fairies, she doesn't have anybody to rule after that. So well, she had the light. I think her plan was to have the Skeezites come kill a few people, and then she'd bring the light and save them, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I guess I just never understood the plan. I was like, is she just gonna be queen of the Skeezites? Because she could just leave Flutterfield and do that on her own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that is initially when she was introduced, I was thinking, oh, she's going to be motivated by she wants to help the working people of Flutterfield. And that's how she sort of positions herself, but that's not really what she's up to. She really just wants to take control. in that sense, she reminds me of Scar in The Lion King, where there's a reading of the Lion King movie where you say, okay, Scar is sort of this champion of the hyenas who are this lower class who are fighting over scraps. Well, the lions have everything they want. So in that sense, he's sort of a hero of the people, but then the movie doesn't ever go that direction. And I think part of that is just the sort of story of that variety where we're introduced to this world and how it works, and then something comes along and we're expected to, or the world must change and the villain is slightly right about things. That's something that we've seen pop up in animation more recently. So it's a thing in Coco where we have the critique of the upper class celebrities within this world of the dead. And it's in Frozen 2 as well. Trolls World Tour, I think, had it. So it's the kind of story that's being told, but quite a few years after this movie came out. So I could see why it isn't the direction they took.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it would be interesting to have. I think the biggest issue I have with the movie, beyond the bibble of it all, is that in the end, no one's even acknowledged the issue of this sort of the working class and then the upper class that don't respect or treat them well.
I
So,
think that's dealt more with the characters than anything at large. From my
yeah,
understanding, the queen wasn't oppressive or anything, so it's not like she needed to
yeah.
change. But then the characters who were did change.
Right, because everyone seemed to actually like Hannah.
And that's what I find interesting about Hannah as a character is that she has these two sides where she's, on the one hand, this sort of really popular person of, or like leader of the people, but then she's also has this sort of power hungry side. But yeah, it is more a story of individuals than of society, where I think if this were made today, it would flip that, kind of the way that Frozen 2 flips it. Um, Coco, some of the other movies I mentioned. But yeah, speaking of the ending, this movie has an exceptional third act.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the Cave of Reflection is such a perfect idea as a narrative device, as a character device, because it externalizes internal conflicts, where we see these characters having their internal struggle as actual dialogue with themselves. And especially for Mariposa, it works so well in making her character land because you really get a sense of this sort of self-doubting that she's been having this entire time, and then she has to very literally ignore it in order to save the day. That is the big climactic moment of the movie. Obviously there's then a bunch of wrap up to get done, but the moment where she says, "Oh, it's that star," and then the version of herself in the mirror says, "Oh, are you sure that one's all by itself? It's lonely. It doesn't matter." She has to go, "No, that's the star. That's the right one." And it's working both as like a plot device and as a metaphor for her learning to see herself as sort of having a place. The Cave of Reflections is just such an interesting idea that adds so much to the end of this movie. And that Mariposa is a very introverted character, which I find interesting. I can't think of any other Barbie protagonists who have been quite this introverted, and that the movie doesn't see that as a problem, and it doesn't treat that as a problem. And instead of learning to overcome her introversion, she's just like, no, she needs to learn to be okay with it, and that it isn't a problem. Yeah, I think that is the best part of this movie is
Mm-hmm.
that third act in the Cave of Reflections. And then the big battle between the fairies and the Skeezites is kind of just the cherry on top.
Of course.
And things get a bit dire for a moment. It looks like the heroes might not win, but of course it's a Barbie movie, so they do.
Yeah, because then we have the secondary plot with Willa and Prince Carlos uncovering the villain plot and
Yeah.
like learning secrets such as you combine these two and they create this magical light and learning to use that. Also, just how the constant reoccurring joke with Willa having to go to a swamp and get these flowers came
Yeah.
back in the end to be an important plot point of that's where the solution comes in.
Yeah.
It came full circle. Rule of threes. It worked really well.
Yeah. Yeah, this movie, more than any of the other Fairytopia movies, has that sort of the setup and payoff structure, which is what we've commented on a lot with the other Barbie movies written by Cliff Ruby and Alana Lesser. And yeah, it's fun to see that level of craft in these Fairytopia movies finally.
There's also just a bunch of just really good, entertaining moments. Like when Willa has to pickpocket and get the keys. Like,
Yeah.
that was fun to watch.
And then that little fairy did that at the end, too, with the flower.
Mm-hmm. Also the mermaids. They had a little quick session there. How the mermaids were the mere reflection of Rayla and whatever her name is.
And Rena.
The sisters.
Yes.
How they were the reflection of the sisters. And how the sisters were really annoyed by the mermaids.
Yeah.
Like, they had a good joke of them, you know, they're being chased by this goober fish. And the mermaids.
Sea beast, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's sea beast, but it looked like the gooberfish thing. Never mind that. But no, they had a really funny line. It's like, alright, we'll help them. Might as well.
I guess the shells are pretty. Maybe we should help them.
Yeah.
All
Also, like, it wasn't Mariposa that came up with the solution to getting the shells. It was one of the other sisters.
Right.
That's like, you know, you'd expect, Mariposa's the one who comes up with the answer, but yeah. So, just interesting.
Yeah, it's the kind of quest where they couldn't have completed it if any of them had stayed home. Or if Mariposa had done the Alina thing and left them behind as soon as she could.
Not so much about the story, but we have this bunny thing. Flutter bunny, whatever that thing is. They don't... that character didn't really have much to offer, except when they needed to find the center of the thing. Like, oh sure, I'll help you. They go around the corner. There it is.
Yeah, she kind of serves as the guide to the bewilderness.
Yeah, but it's also like we need another Bibble type character, but this one can speak.
Well, yeah, overall, I mean, I'm just blown away by how this movie brings its narrative threads together, and then is also just such an improvement on the original Fairytopia, while still it takes everything that could have worked about the original Fairytopia and makes it work. And because of that, I've actually given it a 5 out of 5 for story. It blew me away. That's kind of I was very happy with it.
Yeah, it's a very simple story, but it just works so well. I give it a 3.5. It would be higher if we just didn't have the Bibble cutting into the film, breaking the illusion.
Yeah, and initially I was going to subtract a point for that, but everything else just works so well for me that I felt like that was... I didn't want to take points. I took points off elsewhere for Biffle.
Yeah. And of course, like, more time spent with Henna would have helped make it grander as well. Even just adding so much smaller details, like, they have literature about the outside and the distance. And it's like, so who wrote those books?
Yeah.
Could we have, like, just an author's name? It's a small detail, but it helps make the world feel bigger.
Oh yeah, and I think the prince was asking Mariposa, like, oh, what do you like about this book? And then she's like, I just like that when you read, you can see other universes besides this one. I'm like, okay, that's saying nothing about the book you actually read 10 times. Let's just say what you like about reading, so.
Right. It's like, is the author still around? Did they go and discover this land? Who's the author? What happened?
I gave it a 4 for story. I thought it was good. Like, good story overall, but, not the best. So.
I gave it a 3 because I was like, it's not the best story. There's a lot of things they could have done better. I feel like it's the framework for a good story, but they just need to add more things.
Yeah, I disagree. I think it was great, but to each their own. I can see that perspective. I think coming off of Fairytopia, I may be a bit more impressed than I would have been if I had just watched this cold.
And honestly, I think it's one of the best Barbie movie stories ever. I'm just thinking, like, there's other stories outside the realm of Barbie that are better, which is why it's a 4.
That too. There's different scales we're rating things on as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, next up we have the characters. First up is Mariposa or Mariposa, depending on if you want to pronounce it correctly or incorrectly. I'll let you decide which is which.
Yeah, another thing to point out is just Mariposa is just Spanish for butterfly. And so you take a look at the title, it's like Barbie, Butterfly, and her butterfly fairy friends.
Yeah. And there is that thing where the way the movie distinguishes the upper class and the working class of Flutterfield is partially through accents. So the upper class has the Spanish accents, and then the working class has American or Canadian accents. Generally, the general is sort of in the upper class, but has sort of a North American accent. But I get the sense that he could be like, he was at one point a soldier and then worked his way up the ranks.
Or it just could be our Canadian voice actors trying really hard.
Yes. That's something we'll talk about in the voice acting. But yeah, her name, even in the movie, the pronunciation of it changes.
Mm-hmm. Which I really liked.
And she's just a great protagonist. Again, she's Alina from Fairytopia, but better executed. Yeah, I was blown away. Again, as we've been talking, with how much of an improvement it is, and that her motivations, we get a good sense of them, and sort of her weaknesses and her strengths throughout the story. In that she starts out very dissatisfied with her life. She's working for two fairies who don't respect her, and she doesn't quite in with Flutterfield society. But then she has this journey and she goes into the Cave of Reflections, and she's confronted with the thoughts that she's kind of kept inside and held down, and she has to actually overcome those to sort of succeed and to save Flutterfield. And honestly, it reminded me a bit of one of my favorite comic arcs, the 2015 New Avengers run, where Wiccan, my favorite superhero, is possessed by Moradun, who's sort of this evil character. I don't know that he's all that relevant, but essentially Wiccan, the superhero, has to have this internal struggle of like learning to overcome Moradun, who's manifesting as self-doubt. Yeah, I find that kind of story really engaging.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the kind of character motivation, it just works here in a way that it didn't work in Fairytopia. Yeah, the conclusion to her arc, as we've said before, is that she doesn't need to change who she is. She just needs to find her own way. Not even find her own way. She just needs to embrace her differences and be okay with that.
Yeah, like she said in the cave, like every star has a purpose, even if it's just by itself in the distance.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a, even from like a message perspective, it's so interesting. Yeah, it's one of the better messages we've seen in these Barbie movies. It's more complex than don't gossip, which was the message of Barbie Diaries. Not to pile on that movie, but
It
Yeah,
kind of seems like a VeggieTales moral that they'd come up with as well, though.
yeah,
but more naturally fit into the story than
yeah.
VeggieTales typically.
It's at the very least better than Swan Lake, where the moral of Swan Lake is bravery. Was that it?
I don't
And it's
know.
not a theme of the actual
Nothing,
movie.
because if you die, the movie will solve
Yeah,
itself.
it's one of the better integrations of message and story.
Hmm. Another great thing to point out is that our quote unquote romantic subplot isn't really a factor in this film.
Yeah, Prince Carlos is not the love interest.
He is, but he isn't. Most of his screen time is with Willa,
Yeah,
and they have like fun antics going on.
I feel like he and Will are more likely to get together than him and Mariposa at this point.
Definitely.
yeah. I think he and Mariposa
I
have.
mean, they both like reading the same book.
Yeah,
I feel like they could be friends and stuff, but I just a feeling I got Prince Carlos admired Willa's bravery and all that stuff, so I feel like they'd make a better pair.
yeah. I almost feel like you don't need the romance at all, though.
You don't.
Yeah.
Which is great because a lot of these Barbie movies, especially the early ones, were kind of forcing romantic subplots. And then even Mermaidia didn't have a romance between the protagonist and the Ken character, but
Hmm.
like the romance or the potential for romance was still hanging over the entire movie.
Of course.
Whereas here it's like I almost completely forgot that Carlos was supposed to at any point be a love interest because he's not
Mm.
really.
Another like small point where I felt like more time really could have been added to this film, and I wouldn't dislike it. But yeah, so how the plot really happens is that Mariposa meets Carlos. They're like, oh, we like the same book. The very next scene, Carlos shows up at her house, and it's like, the queen's been poisoned. Take this map. Find this thing.
How does he know where she lives? Just,
He probably has access to the
Yeah.
records and stuff, and he knew her name.
yeah, but like, I mean, that's a little creepy. You meet this guy, you run into this guy, and he all of a sudden the next day shows up at your house. Just like a
Yeah.
little.
Adding a little more padding in between would
Yeah.
probably
Even-
make that section not as rushed.
Yeah. Even just a scene of the two of them reading together out by the light. Like that would have been a good connection moment, and that it would also feel maybe a little less abrupt when he's like, "You're the only person I can trust." Well, you two met yesterday. Are you sure?
And he probably hasn't met many other fairies, especially
Yeah.
not ones that like to read. I wonder how the authors get paid. Like, is it just the prince sponsoring them because he likes books, basically?
I mean, maybe.
Do they get paid?
Yeah. The next sort of major character is Willa, who's Mariposa's best friend. She's the classic sarcastic best friend initially,
Mm.
but then she gets her own plot and she kind of becomes instrumental to saving Flutterfield. And yeah, I don't know that I have a ton to say about her character, but I thought she was a fun addition to the movie that really added to the fabric of it.
She was enjoyable to watch.
Yeah. She doesn't have an arc, so to speak, but she doesn't need one because Mariposa's arc is so strong.
Mm-hmm.
And she has like maybe a tiny little arc about bravery. But
And she stumbles upon this plot just by
Yes.
overhearing. It's like, holy crap, she poisoned the queen.
yeah. And then that she doesn't back away. That she's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do what's right, even if it means going back to the swamp for more thistleberries. Yeah, next up we have Rayla and Reyna, who they start out very shallow. They don't respect Mariposa or Willa at all. Barely even see them as like fellow fairies. They're just kind of like, oh, you're here to do whatever we need.
It really reminded me of like Cinderella, basically,
Yeah.
where they were the evil stepsisters and Mariposa's Cinderella. And yeah, that's part of the reason I thought that they wouldn't be on the adventure, and like at the end Mariposa would get sweet revenge against them, because that's what happens in Cinderella stories. So it's nice to actually see them go through their own arc.
Yeah, because you never expect them to be on this journey, but then they are, and it just adds something to it.
Yeah,
I'm not disappointed with them being there.
It's an interesting connection to make, and now that you bring it up, it reminds me a bit of that Cinderella 2, the Disney movie, which is not a great movie, but there is a sort of a story about one of Cinderella's stepsisters that I think I may have to revisit it because I remember it
She
being
falls in love with a baker.
Yeah, and sort of has her own subplot, and it's like, oh yeah, they're treating these characters with more empathy than they're usually given.
Also, I noticed that they don't use the 3 different colors, because Mariposa and one of the sisters are both pink. And so that was very interesting to me, is like, that's why I kind of thought they would be left behind, because it's like, you can't have 2 pink characters. Oh no, they can't go on the adventure together.
Yeah. Now, I will say, though, one of the issues with them is I can't tell which is which at any point. I don't even know if the story can tell which is which. Like, I think one of them, I think the pink one is the one who sort of has the bigger arc. And it's the one who kind of recognizes Mariposa earlier, because she's the one who decides to stay behind in the Cave of Reflections. Because she's like, no, Mariposa can do this better than I can. I think that there is a slight distinction between the two, but I'd honestly have to rewatch the movie with that lens in order to tell. Because you can't, their names are so similar, they look so similar despite the color differences.
Yeah, the only difference I could distinguish was like one of them was voiced by Kathleen Barr, and I could immediately capture her voice.
Okay. Yeah, and they initially start on this quest to win Prince Carlos, kind of like Emma was bringing up of the stepsisters in Cinderella, sort of motivated by this potential of a marriage to a prince. But then they develop so far beyond that throughout the story. And then they start to see just how much they rely on Mariposa and start to acknowledge it. And yeah, it's such a good arc for these side characters that really pays off well.
And maybe even acknowledging themselves, if a little bit more time was spent that, like especially after seeing the mermaids who are the same, if they could see that within themselves, it's like, is this what we look like? We kind of suck.
Yeah, at the end they said, like after meeting the mermaids, they said a line something like, "Oh, they remind us of some fairies we used to know." So that shows them they're acknowledging it, and then they're also acknowledging that they're different now too, which was nice.
Okay, next up is Prince Carlos.
He reads.
It was very interesting that why don't the male butterfly fairies also get butterfly wings? Because it's not like male butterflies have different wings than female butterflies.
Yeah, they should have like monarch butterfly wings or something instead of, or whatever, like, because the girl fairies had all the same type of butterfly wing, just a different color. They could have given a different butterfly wing to the guys.
Yeah. But the guys get the weird little
dragonfly
wings.
Typical fairy wings, I guess.
Are they 2 different types of fairies, maybe?
It could just be that butterflies are just seen as more feminine.
Yeah, that would be my guess. It is maybe a missed design opportunity, though.
Yeah, because they're kind of boring.
Yeah.
Those wings.
I did think it was funny when he was trying to get out of the thing, and then he was like, "Oh, but the key!" And then she's like, "I don't know where the key is." So he's like, the next line he somehow works in, "The key on your belt!"
Yeah, he has a good dynamic with Willa throughout the movie.
By himself, he's just fine. But, like, when he's interacting with other characters to do stuff, he's pretty great.
And last up for our sort of main group of heroes, we have Zinzi, the flying bunny fairy something or other.
Mm-hmm.
She's a better companion than Bibble. Doesn't take much to do that, but she passes that very low bar.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't have a ton to do beyond that. She's somewhat of a comedic relief, but she shows up pretty far into the movie.
Right, and her jokes don't always land.
No. Which, to be fair, Bibble's jokes never landed, so the fact that any of hers land at all is an improvement.
She likes fluttercorn.
Yep. She's very clearly in the movie to sell toys.
She is.
And unlike Bibble, her design is not uncannily terrifying.
She's just a bunny with wings.
Yeah.
She's like Scooby from Scooby-Doo. You give her Scooby snacks and she'll do anything for you.
Yeah, what is fluttercorn just like caramel corn?
Sure.
Must be. I always thought it was like candy corn, but I
I
don't
thought
know.
it was just normal popcorn, but
Well, it was colored like candy.
It was drizzled some frosting
Yeah.
or something.
I wonder if we can buy fluttercorn. Try it out.
I mean,
We can probably
go,
find a recipe.
go to Disney World. You can get some stuff there.
Go to Fairytopia Land in Disney World.
Something like that.
If they made that, we would have to go for this podcast.
Oh my gosh. Surely at some point they must have had a Barbie theme park.
Oh yeah. I mean, or at least a ride.
At least a ride. Because that's
least
like
a ride.
that's a golden opportunity.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to do some research. Maybe do a
For
bonus
purposes.
episode.
Maybe. Live with video.
Yeah, we could record an episode on the Barbie coaster.
And so this is the coaster. It's really fast. I'm kind of scared.
I don't think you even need a field trip. You could just pretend you're there.
Yeah.
John's got it down.
Next up, we have our villains. So we have Henna, who is, again, we've talked a bit about her. I don't know that I have much more to say. She should have just really started a union. Like, she clearly has the support for it.
She was trying with Mariposa. She kept
Yes.
on telling Mariposa, join me, come on.
Yeah,
She didn't
so-
try very hard. She kind of just said, "Oh, if you join me, I'll give you everything," and then left it
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah.
I think it would have been more interesting if she tried more on that.
Yeah.
Like,
And-
I'm reminded of Guardians of the Galaxy. No, not Guardians. What was
Guardians
Rise of the
Dahul?
Guardians? No. Where
Rise
Jack
of the
Frost-
Guardians of Dahul
There's too many of Guardians.
of the
movies.
Galaxy.
But it's a DreamWorks animated story where Jack Frost feels like he doesn't fit in, and Pitch Black, who's the villain, also feels like he doesn't fit in. So when, like, Jack's thrown out by the Guardians, and Pitch comes up to him and is like, "Hey, we would make a great team. I totally understand where you're coming from." And I thought that scene was really cool, and they could have done something similar in this one as well, shown how similar and yet different the villain and the hero are.
Yeah. I think part of that is, and honestly, I mean, I understand why it's there, but Henna, you can always tell when she's lying. So they never have that sort of like, we're not so different, you and I. I mean, they have the moment, but like you were saying, it could have been highlighted a little bit better. So next up we have the Skeezites. So they're kind of the secondary villains.
They're ugly.
Yeah, they're like giant flies. They want to
They're
eat
just giant,
fairies.
not very smart, only care about food.
Yeah, you'd think, like, wouldn't they all starve to death because they don't really get many butterflies for
I was
us to
wondering
eat?
about that.
No wonder they want to eat all the time. They don't get anything to eat. Maybe if you just fed them a little bit, some fairy sacrifices, maybe they wouldn't bother you so much.
I think there's too many of them, but like, would they ever just starve out? Like, die out? I don't know.
Probably
Apparently not, because they're still around. They're annoying.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure there are other locations, because like the bunny,
Oh yeah.
she's not protected in any way, so they must get like fairy wildlife.
Do they only like fairies?
It must be their favorite treat.
Yeah.
It's probably the most nourishing meal out there.
Yeah. They're more of like plot devices to add some tension to scenes than actual characters.
Mm.
Uh-huh.
If you take away their dialogue, I think they would be much better.
Yeah. Maybe give them slightly more menacing noises than the ah.
Fairies!
But you can't scare the kids.
Yeah, I think they are sort of holding back for the
Yeah.
audience. But this movie does go a little bit darker than a lot of these Barbie movies go.
Right. They should have eaten henna at the end.
That might have been a bridge too far.
Yeah, it probably was, but that's the logical decision.
You wouldn't have to show her, but maybe she could be running away from the queen, and then the Skeezites come and like, you promised us fairies that you didn't give us, and then they kind of whisk her away.
Like
Yeah.
she escapes with them.
But I guess you want the possibility of a sequel, so you have to
Yeah.
have her still be the villain in the next one.
I assume she's alive, but if she doesn't come back, I'll just assume she got eaten.
Yeah, that was also what I was thinking when she was going off with that. I was like, why are you going with them? You're better off in the dungeon of Flutterfield than anywhere they would take you.
Unless she has pocket light.
I honestly could have done with fewer scenes of the Skeezites. Specifically scenes of them just kind of bumbling around.
Yeah, because they were almost comic relief and villains. So.
Yeah. They're very much like the fungus of
Mm-hmm.
Fairytopia. And not even Fungus Maximus, who's sort of a fun, over-the-top villain. They're kind of just floating around. Then we have some supporting characters, which I don't have listed here because they don't really factor in. There's Queen Marabella.
Yeah.
And she's asleep for most of the movie, so we don't get much of a sense. She
has more of a role than the Enchantress does.
Yeah. She's given more to do, and we get a clearer sense just from the backstory of who she is.
Mm-hmm.
Then we also have Lord Gastrus, who's sort of the general.
Why is the general more in charge than the prince?
I would guess it's the situation where...
Because the queen was poisoned, kind of?
Well,
Or...
yeah. That would be... And that the prince isn't necessarily fit to rule at this point.
Maybe.
I remember him explaining it in a line, but I don't remember what that line said.
I wonder, I don't know, this might be stretching it, if he's the father of the prince, so he's kind of the king a bit. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's maybe...
I don't think
that's,
he is.
Yeah, I don't know, but... Or he's
Yeah,
just
it's an
trying to get the
interesting
throne.
theory. But yeah, I mean, he's basically just there to be the general to say, okay, we're locking up the prince, don't escape. And then, of course, Henna wouldn't do it. I trust her, even though she says every line as if it's a lie.
I was wondering why, like, he sends out his little armies to go capture the prince to initially get him locked away, and then he doesn't send out his armies after he realizes the prince has escaped from his little cage. Like,
Yeah, or at least not that we see. Yeah, there is a Dever. Willa and Carlos don't ever have to escape anyone.
Yeah, you'd think that would be even more important, because the queen's even closer to dying. And... That maybe at that point Henna figured it wasn't important enough, so she dissuaded the general, maybe? I don't know. Or didn't persuade him or whatever. Because she was definitely in charge at that point.
Yeah. And then, yeah, finally we have Alina and Bibble. Yeah, they're the weakest part of the movie, I think.
Yeah, especially Bibble. Like Alina, at least the story kind of reflects her own story, but better. So just having her explain things in a way makes me appreciate her story a little bit more.
Yeah, the sort of kinship she maybe feels with Mariposa.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they really didn't need to interrupt the story halfway through, though, for Bibble to get to say, oh, they got to eat something good when they went underwater and we had to eat a disgusting seaweed. Like, okay, did that really need to be in there?
Right. Just to
Yeah.
remind us that they're there. It really feels like they had the Mariposa story, but they were like, let's just put in Bibble. Because people love Bibble.
Yeah, because it doesn't have any connections to Fairytopia beyond the framing narrative. Yeah, I wonder at what point in the process Fairytopia was added back in.
Mm-hmm.
If it started out that way, or if it was like, okay, here's our script for Barbie Mariposa, and someone was like, hey, what about Fairytopia?
Maybe they were like, oh, it's not long enough. Okay, we'll add 3 minutes of Bibble.
Yeah, is this the longest Fairytopia movie just by the fact that it doesn't start with a recap of the other Fairytopia movies?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I was looking forward to the hour-long recap movie before you actually got into the
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah, you get the recap of the previous film, and then you start this story. It's like, wait, that's the same movie.
Yeah, for me at this point, Bibble is just like death and taxes. You either live your life thinking about it as little as possible, or you go a little crazy. So I've just been trying to ignore Bibble. Not being a part of the story, he didn't bring my enjoyment overall down, but I did take off half a point for him being in the story at all, which is why I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 in terms of characters.
I give it a 3.5 out of 5.
I gave it a 3 out of 5.
I gave it a 3.5 out of 5.
Once again, I am the lone voice this high up, although I think we all enjoyed the characters as well.
No, we did. Obviously,
Yeah.
much more could be done to add to it.
Like, I see there's still, like, quite a few characters that I didn't like. They're, like, the main characters were done really well, but there were others that I didn't like, and they could have done a few things better, too, so that's why
Yeah.
it's middle of
like
the road.
The Skeezites and the bunny.
Yeah. Like, the main characters, they all did really good, but then all the other characters weren't, so...
And you can add some more to just maybe Carlos and Henna.
Yeah.
They're still pretty solid.
Yeah. Next up, we have animation.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say solid all around.
Yeah, except for the Skeezite designs.
Yep.
Pretty solid.
I really like in this movie, like in the Fairytopia movies, when they have to fly faster, it doesn't seem like they're flying faster. But in this one, when they say we have to fly faster, their wings actually move a bit faster. So you're like, oh, they're actually flying faster. Whereas the Fairytopia movie, it's like they're running away from something and they look like they're flying the same speed as they're casually flying around.
Maybe had a few more sparkles or something, I don't know.
Or just make a longer backdrop and just zoom faster.
Yeah. Yeah, the wing animation was much better. The wings felt like they were moving in a way that corresponded to what the fairies were doing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't notice specifically the movement, but I did notice several other things.
Also, when, like, Mariposa's wings got bigger at the end, they started flapping slower, because I guess she didn't need as much energy or something.
Yeah.
I love how, like, they didn't even change her costume. It's just, she gets bigger wings.
Yep.
And sparkly.
Sparkles!
Can't forget the sparkles.
Why does her wings become so big? I don't know. It just...
Because she finally recognized who she was.
Yeah.
Queen.
It's the classic fairy tale thing of the physical transformation mirrors and internal transformation.
Mm-hmm. But what does this
But,
mean
yeah.
for her role afterwards? She's still working for the two sisters?
Yeah, I
Does
guess
she work for the queen?
We'll have to watch the Mariposa and whatever the next movie is.
I don't know. It's so far ahead, though.
Yeah. I'm curious to see, because these Fairytopia movies have been coming out one year after another. Curious to see what the next one, which will be a few years removed, will be like. But yeah, in terms of the animation, I think there's a lot of excellent sets. Um, there's this very specific design pattern that shows up, which there's a lot of arcs and like arches throughout pretty much every design. And it brings a visual cohesion to everything. And there's also use of darker and cooler colors all around that really distinguish it from the other Fairytopia movies. And then Flutterfield is incredibly well designed. There's lots of lights, lots of pastels, and you can actually see the social stratification. The working class, they live in the roots, and then the upper class live up in the tops of the trees. So yeah, it's just really well designed.
Mm-hmm.
The Bewilderness again has these sort of these arches and these arcs all in the design, and they kind of start to resemble animal bones, particularly in the Cave of Reflection, which looks like the skeleton of a giant snake just sort of winding its way up into nothingness. And then it opens up to this really neat little area with stars.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how like in this Fairytopia movie, everything feels like organic shapes, like they came from nature. Whereas like in the other Fairytopia movies, it's like we're just gonna put a swirl there and a swirl here, and it doesn't feel like it belongs there. Whereas like I feel like they took a lot of shapes. Because if you look in the windows in Flutterfield, a lot of them are shaped like butterfly wings or have patterns like butterfly wings. So it's just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. You'd model your houses like after the butterfly wings. That's such an important thing. Whereas like Fairytopia, the other Fairytopias, it's like, we just think this looks cool. Let's put that there.
Also, the Cave of Reflections, that skeleton thing that doesn't have an explanation, but it looks cool.
Yeah. Honestly, the Cave of Reflections is just such a great, both from a visual and from a like thematic and narrative standpoint, is just a real pinnacle of any of the movies we've seen thus far. Yeah, camera movement is pretty good as well. Nothing stood out to me as much as the other movies, but maybe something stood out to other people.
I really like the just basic character designs for our main fairy characters. This is a good use of colors. Even like Willa and Henna, even though my main issue with them is that they look so similar that you can confuse them sometimes. But there's still good uses of colors for them.
Yeah, I was impressed with the animation overall, except for the creature design. Mm-hmm. I think that's where it falls short.
Yeah.
Especially the Skeezites.
I don't know. I didn't hate the Skeezites, actually.
Yeah? Talk about it.
I don't know why exactly, but... I mean, because they're, like, ugly, but they're not scary, which is kind of nice. For kids, at least.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We need to traumatize kids.
It didn't traumatize me. I don't know. I didn't hate them.
Yeah. I think they work because you're not supposed to like them.
Yeah, they're good hateable design without being scary, you know?
They're kind of like Titans from Attack on Titan. Huh,
yeah.
You have your protected wall, but as soon as you go out, you have these creatures who just want to eat you.
They're interesting. Yeah. Again, I wasn't necessarily impressed, but I can see how their design isn't as terrible as maybe I was painting it to be.
It's not as bad as the other animals in Mermaidia.
Yes, that's true. The dolphin in Mermaidia.
They could have just taken the dolphin, put little wings, and called him a Skeezite, and
That actually would have been more menacing.
It would have, yeah.
But yeah, overall, I gave the animation a 4 out of 5. Just very good. I could have used a little bit more, but I liked it.
Yeah, I give it a 3.5. Still solid, but more could just be done to make the Skeezites less goofy.
I gave it a 4.5. I liked it.
I gave it a 4 because it could have been a lot better, but it was still really good animation. Got the point across.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There were some good moments in there too, so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm contemplating doing something, and I think I'm going to go for it. I'm going to bump my score up to a 4.5.
Whoa.
Whoa!
I think I talked myself into it. And Emma talked me into it as well a bit with the Skeezites. I like the design here quite a bit. And I also want to raise my overall score, but yeah, it's good. So next up we have voice acting. Yeah.
Very interesting
Yeah.
how Kelly is voicing Alina, but she's not voicing the other Barbie character, which is so interesting choice to make.
This is our first non-Kelly Barbie protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell, like, Chiara Zani isn't attempting to do a Kelly Sheridan voice.
Right. I mean, her voice isn't something that I'd immediately think to be Barbie, but I think her voice works for just the character that she's portraying. The timid, unsure certainty. She has a good performance in this.
Yeah. I've heard complaints about her performance. I don't know if anyone has any complaints here.
See, the main complaint is that she's so completely different from Kelly.
Yeah.
Like, I could see that being a complaint. Because, like, when I see Mariposa's voice from her design, it's like, that doesn't exactly match because I'm trained to hear Kelly's voice.
Yeah. I like having Cherazani, who has a very distinctive voice, as the protagonist. I think it's a nice change of pace. But yeah, I can see where if you're used to, well, even we are used to Kelly as Barbie, then it's a little bit jarring.
It is kind of nice though, because I mean it's just like different, and I feel like the voice does fit the character better, and and I think also part of it is like, where you don't really want her voice to match her design because, she looks like all the other fairies, but she doesn't feel like she fits in. So giving that her voice doesn't fit in with her really design that much shows like, oh, she looks like all the other fairies, but she isn't quite like all the other fairies. So
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that read on it.
Yeah. Another thing that I like is that a lot of the main characters are voiced by people that I'm familiar with. Because we have Tabitha St. Germain as Willa, we have Nicole Oliver as our villain, Kathleen Westluck is the bunny.
Yeah, a lot of familiar Barbie faces, and then also just familiar voice actors in general.
Who previously were just like below, they're just background characters. Here being put in the foreground is great.
Yeah,
because I know some of them, so they're great. I love them.
Yeah, I think Tabitha St. Germain as Willa stood out to me. She's very good at the sarcasm that you need
she
for
really
that character.
Is.
She has the
Tabitha
right
is
voice.
sarcastic as heck.
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
I think Henna, I had an issue with Nicole Oliver as Henna, which is that she leans a bit too far into selling every line as a lie,
Mm.
which honestly, that might just be a directing thing and not an issue with her performance. But I am putting it here in the voice acting because that is. I think she does a good job when she sort of takes it back a little bit and doesn't add those inflections to her voice to be like, oh, I'm lying to you right now.
Although I will say, whenever I see things like those in animation, my immediate thought is, okay, she's doing that for the audience. In world, she's not that obvious of a liar. Because you
Yeah,
want the kids knowing that she's the bad guy. You want them to know
yeah,
that she's lying. So for me, being over the top in that does make sense.
yeah.
Right.
And I agree, it makes sense. It's a nitpick like the Skeezites not being menacing enough, where it's like,
Yeah.
I totally understand why. I just, yeah, it's
Mhm.
something
That
that I
makes sense.
noticed.
Yeah, another thing to point out is that they decided to distinguish their world by making most of their characters use a Spanish accent.
Yeah,
I was fine with it. I thought it was entertaining to see them try.
yeah. It's to me, it was a bit dodgy all around. It doesn't break anything, and I might have to reassess my score because it doesn't break anything. But yeah,
I mean, I like the difference. I like that they're trying to stick with a Spaniard nation.
yeah, it adds some stuff. Though, as we've seen with other Barbie movies, accents are not always the voice actor's strongest suits.
They're Canadians.
Yeah. You can tell it's Canadians trying to pull off a Spanish accent. And
I mean,
it's not terrible, but
we understand what they're doing. We can immediately identify it's a Spanish accent, so at least they got that down.
yeah.
I think my favorite voice with a Spanish accent was Kathleen Barr, because I think she nailed the syllables. Like Mariposa, she nailed that word. I loved that.
I think overall the voice acting was good. It was just that the dodgy accent work. And then also, picking a bone with it, the pronunciation of Mariposa
Mm-hmm.
just bothers me so much. Even though I've been pronouncing it the way it's pronounced in the movie throughout this episode, it's just like,
It's the American way to say
yeah,
Mariposa.
it's so hurts my soul as someone who speaks Spanish fluently, and it's and I mean, there's the line where it's Willa is in the window and she's over enunciating it, Mariposa, making sure to
And
put a
Carlos is,
little,
Mariposa!
yeah,
Yeah.
Another fun moment
yeah,
that doesn't need to be
Sometimes,
there.
sometimes that happens when someone's trying to. They're like, "How do you say something in Spanish?" And I tell them, and they say it completely wrong, and I'm like, "Okay, you know what?"
yeah. It's yeah. Maybe I'm being a bit too harsh on it, but
I know, like,
No, I get it. It is kind of insulting.
yeah, I actually didn't care too much about the Spanish accent, just because I'm also not very good at with accents, so I understand that. What annoyed me more was, the typical teenage girl mermaids that were like, oh, but no, and, that really annoyed me.
They gave him the Valley Girl accent. I like that
yep.
there was a distinction as well.
Yeah, I would say honestly, besides there's a lot of interesting vocal choices in this
Mm-hmm.
movie. I like the Valley Girl mermaids. The one I didn't like was the Skeezites.
No,
And then yeah, Bibble. Bibble is back.
Bibble.
I think he seemed less vocal. Not in terms of he was saying less, but in terms of you could understand him less.
More or less?
Less
Oh,
because
okay.
because he was making more unintelligible noises. At least from what I could tell. Now I'm not going to go back and watch Bibble clips to compare it, so take that with a
It could
grain of
also
salt.
just be the script writing where Bibble's lines here were not as important.
Yeah. Alina repeats almost everything he says.
Correct.
So you don't need him to you don't need to understand him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Any other thoughts about voice acting?
I guess just overall, like, the last Barbie movie I watched was the 12 Dancing Princesses for that episode. And in 12 Dancing Princesses, it felt like all the voices felt natural. So maybe that's why in this one, where a whole bunch of the voices feel unnatural and overacted, just felt like worse quality. But that's also just a difference in the story, I think.
So overall, I actually bumped up my score a bit because I was being a bit too harsh on it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 for the accent, or for the, not the accent, for the voice acting.
The
I think-
accent's get a 4 out of 5.
I think Chiarazani knocks it out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tabitha St. Germain also knocks it out of the park. I think the accent work still a little bit dodgy, but I'll give it a pass.
Yeah, I get it a 3.5. The accents didn't change anything about it. Of course, everyone's overreacting. It's fine. It's really just the voices that don't have a lot of effort put into it, like the Skeezites. They're just your typical lazy, evil-sounding, dumb villains.
Yeah. You could swap their voices out with the fungus voices and you wouldn't notice.
Mm. I mean, they're I think they're also voiced by Lee Talker, so it's the same voice.
Yeah,
maybe.
there's actually 2 actors doing the Skeezites. There's also Terry Klassen
Okay.
playing Skeezite number 1. Which one that is? There seem to be more than 2, and there's only 2 listed in the cast, but
I think there's only ever 2 that talk to each other at
Yeah,
a time, though.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
my voice acting score is a 2.5. Again, just like the overacting of all of it took me out of the experience. So
Yeah, I gave it a 4 out of 5 just because of the accents kind of brought it down a little bit, you know.
Well, yeah, next up we have finally the music. So this is once again Eric Colvin back for the music. What did people think?
I mean, music is music.
I think it really fit the story well because in this Barbie movie, when the music comes on, you don't really notice that it's there.
No.
Whereas the other ones, you're like, oh, here's the music. So I really liked that because it doesn't bring away from the movie.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's there to blend in with the environment. It doesn't stand out a whole lot, but there's one moment that does, and that's the moment when we think that Henna has won. She's destroyed the flower. And the music kicks up as like, duh, 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 are we gonna lose? But then Queen wakes up and is like, okay.
Yeah, I liked that moment a lot. And I liked a lot of moments throughout the score. Though I do definitely agree that kind of fades into the background. I don't think it's nearly as egregious as either of the first 2 Fairytopia movies, but it's not nearly the jump in quality that was made between Mermaidia and Magic of the Rainbow.
Mm-hmm.
Here they are reusing tracks a lot less. In fact, I didn't recognize any tracks being reused at all. So that at the very least is a point in my book.
yeah, I know in my case I don't notice scores anyway when I'm watching movies. So honestly, I don't remember any of them. Which, yeah. So none that were super standout good, none that were super standout bad.
Oh yeah, I gave the music a 4 out of 5. So again, good. It's solid for what it needs to be.
Yeah. This film has a very consistent score for me, 3.5 out of 5, where it's solid, it's not bad, but it doesn't quite jump up to be very good.
Yep, I gave it a 3. It just seems middle of the road, nothing super amazing that I actually noticed, but also nothing that took away from the experience.
I actually gave it a 5 out of 5. It might just be because I watch this movie all the time and I'm just like, oh, I remember this music. I love it so much. but I really did enjoy the music, and it does go well on its own, even without the movie. And it also goes so well in the movie, it doesn't feel out of place. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
we're kind of all over the place with the music, which is interesting.
We're all over the place in general. with our
Yeah.
scores here. Yeah.
This is going to be an interesting final score to hash out.
Yeah, because I think we all enjoy it, but our ratings are just different in how we rate it. Yeah, because for me, this is a 17.5, which is 70% and a 3.5 5-star rating, of course. But I did really enjoy this film.
Yeah, I for me this is one of my favorites thus far. And since I bumped up a few scores as we were recording, it's actually gone even higher on my personal list, just in terms of based on scores. So yeah, I currently have it sitting at a 22 out of 25, which is an 88% or 4.4. That, I believe, puts it right above Rapunzel to be my third favorite of these Barbie films, at least thus far. And I think it deserves that place. I'll be honest, I really, really liked it.
I have 17 out of 25. It's a failing grade, unfortunately. At 68%. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was fun. The story, I mean, it's like not a film I would see again just on my own time, but I had an enjoyable time while watching it for the most part.
I gave it a 19.5, 78%. Yeah, it's good. I would watch it again. Probably not the first movie I pick off the shelf, but definitely would watch it again, and I like it, so.
Yeah. That gives us an average score of 19 out of 25, or 76%, which is a 3.8. Overall, we are coming in pretty high up. It beats out Swan Lake just barely because of how high we ranked its story. Looks like it's coming in just behind Island Princess. So pretty high up for our overall list as well. Though not nearly as high as I have it on my own list. Again, you can check out our Letterboxd if you want to see an up-to-date list of our rankings and everything you would want to see there.
Solid movie. Solid Barbie movie, I guess.
Yeah.
I remember liking it a lot when I was a kid, but then rewatching it, it just didn't hold the same wonder and didn't like I've had so many better stories that I've seen since then, but yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to have something that I've enjoyed given the past few weeks I've been not feeling them as well.
Yeah, I've been feeling them the past few weeks, but I agree that it's nice to have another excellent entry into these movies. And one that surprised me, I didn't remember liking this one, so I didn't go in expecting to like it, and yet it was just great and an improvement on a different Barbie movie that I had pretty major problems with. So you can listen to our episode on Fairytopia for those.
Thank you everyone for listening. Make sure to follow us on social media. We're Binging Barbie Podcast on Instagram, at Binging Barbie on Twitter, and Binging Barbie, a Barbie movie podcast on Letterboxd, where you can find an up-to-date list on our Barbie movie rankings. Join us next week for a truly magical adventure as we discuss Barbie and the Diamond Castle.
Yeah, this one should be good. It's considered one of the good ones, so look forward to that.
Have not.
Well, yeah, this one is. We'll talk about it on the episode.
Barbie, Mariposa, and her butterfly fairy friends. That is a mouth twister. Yes, Barbie, Butterfly, and her butterfly fairy friends. Barbie, Mariposa, and her butterfly and her butterfly fairy friends.
Barbie Mariposa and her butterfly fairy friends. Try saying that 5 times fast. Barbie, Mariposa, and her butterfly fairy. It's really good.
You can't even get it one time fast.
Well,
Yeah.
you try.
Barbie, Mariposa, and her butterfly fairy friends.
Okay. Sarah?
Wow.
Guess Emma should do the intro.
I guess so.
Barbie, Mariposa, and her butterfly fairy friends.
Barbie, Mariposa, and her butterfly fairy friends.
Barbie, Mariposa, and her butterfly fairy friends.
Butter Mariposa?
Butter Mariposa?
That's what John said.
Is that what I said?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Too bad we aren't in the actual episode. Then I could turn that into a meme. Maybe I still could.
I mean, it was recording on my end. You can just.
It's recorded on my end as well. Guess we're
The
adding
Skype
that
is not
in.
recording, but you know.
It'll work out. We can sort it.
Yeah, we can sort it out. It's fine.
I'll tag it to the end of the episode as a special little thing for anyone who sticks around.
Special.